Hello, BookTube. I've got some new books I want to show you and talk to you about a bit, including some mail that we can open because a big pile of packages, almost one of those plastic tubs full, uh, arrived yesterday late in the middle of the furnace of the sunset hour. Yesterday was a warm day, and sunset was the most ferocious part of it. And then after that, there's radial cooling, uh, where the stored heat in the place radiates off into space or goes wherever it is that it goes, and that can often feel worse. That can often feel hotter than the day. Uh, I'm not complaining. I loved it. The only problem is that I am now Frida's jailer instead of her best friend, because when we're out and about, she wants to tear off with all the energy in the world to the ends of the earth, and she is particularly vulnerable to the heat. She has been since she was a little puppy. I mean, puppies overheat anyway, but even then, when she was tiny, I noticed this is a little bit more than that. And that is still true. She's extremely vulnerable to the heat. She wilts. But her spirit is just undauntable. So I'm the one who has to say, no, no, we have to turn back. No, this can't be a long walk. But I myself love the weather. And we got back from one of those curtailed walks, and there it was, a pile of books. So we'll go through those, but we'll go through the two books that I got that were opened off camera. Only two, so not much to yell at me about. The first one is something I love. It's something that I have been championing it on this channel forever and ever. This is from Pegasus Books, and this is Lawrence Ellsworth's ongoing translation of the works of Alexander Dumas. This is Between Two Kings, a sequel to The Three Musketeers, but they all look like this. All of them do, and they are absolutely wonderful. I am, of course, extremely eager for his Count of Monte Cristo, but I will take all of these. His Three Musketeers is so wonderful, and so are all the others, the ones you haven't heard about. This one comes out in the first week of July, and the summary is that for years D'Artagnan shared his adventures with his three comrades, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. But now, in Between Two Kings, the first musketeer returns to the forefront. This is truly D'Artagnan's novel, bringing to a dramatic climax the story that began when he first arrived in Paris 30 years earlier in The Three Musketeers. And these are always lovely productions by Pegasus Press. I think they know the winner they've got here. These are going to be the definitive Dumas forever in English. So, and I'm glad that they're doing this justice. They make them look pretty. They make them look uniform. You can have a whole shelf of these. So I was very, very happy to see this. Not 100% sure what the review status is for July, but I'm certainly hoping to write about it. If not, I will mention it to you again in July. Then the next book is far more complicated than that. This is How the Word is Passed, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America. This is Clint Smith's debut work, his debut book. And it's about statues to Confederate generals. It's about not so much institutional slavery, institutional racism, as institutional memories of slavery and of the Confederacy. And that's a touchy subject, of course. It's a touchstone subject for our era. And I have more often than not been very disappointed and sometimes even enraged by the treatment of that subject in the 21st century. As I've made clear on this channel, I've tried to be very diplomatic about it. But needless to say, I was not encouraged by the blurb on the cover. We need this book by Ibram X. Kendi, whose book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, is the actual written blueprint of every aspect of this subject that annoys me in the 21st century. His book is enraging. Absolutely enraging. When you dig down deep into it, it's enraging. Because it doesn't just say, it's not enough, if you're a white person in America, it's not enough for you to not be racist. You have to be anti-racist. You have to fight racism actively. It's not enough for him to say that. It doesn't just say that. That would be an interesting stance on its own. I would tend, in a way, to agree with some aspects of that. Your complacency really does indict you, especially when, after the year of George Floyd, especially when social media is showing you injustices where you can't just look away. They're right there. You have to know about them. I would say probably that has always been true. I had a great deal of scorn for complacency above all other things except wickedness back when Martin Luther King was marching, back when the civil rights legislation was going through Congress, and so on and so forth. Boston busing is another example where, but so I might have been sympathetic to it's unnuanced, but at least I might have been sympathetic to some approach like that, making a distinction between not racism, not being a racist and being an anti-racist. I might have made some distinction about that. I might have appreciated that, even as unnuanced as it is, because that statement alone, that is not all that Ibram X. Kendi says, but that statement alone has as its shadow statement unspoken something that is very true, which is that racism survives if racists are comfortable. If they have a place of comfort they can retreat to, then they don't have to examine their behaviors. Racist lawmakers don't have to change their ways if they have a place they can retreat to. And that place where they can retreat is not necessarily more racism. They can also retreat to complacency. They can retreat to the suburbs, where the people out there on those patios cooking those burgers and talking to their kids aren't racist. They are just complacent. They aren't what Ibram X. Kendi would call anti-racist. And racism can go there to recover, to lick its wounds, to make plans for the future. So I might have been okay with a book like that, but in Ibram X. Kendi's book, it isn't just that. It's you need to be an anti-racist, or you are a racist. And if you're asking, well, I don't want anyone to call me a racist, but I've never heard the word anti-racist before, so how do I be one? I don't even know what that is. So if you're making a case, well, if you are not an anti-racist, then you are a racist. Well, I don't want to be a racist, but what's an anti-racist? In that book, Ibram X. Kendi is right there in every chapter to say, it's exactly what I say it is, and not anything else. I, myself, alone, personally, the author of this book, are also the arbiter of whether or not you're a racist. Which, the more it became clear as I read that book, the more infuriated it made me, and the more I wanted to ask him to do something, and also, the horse he rode in on, a very South Boston request. Then South Boston, of course, has the least grounds to be huffy on the subject of institutional racism in Boston history. But nevertheless, if you searched your own conscience, if you worked in your own way, you don't want to hear that. I certainly didn't. And the book is also boring and pedantic and pretty much openly, mobster threatening. It's a good social reputation you got here. Shame if something were to happen to it. I hate that aspect of the 21st century. That nothing worthwhile about personal growth can be coerced. None of it can. It has to be taught and encouraged. It can't be shamed. That doesn't work. That makes it worse. And when I saw this blurb, I thought, oh no. And that, of course, is not just, right? It's not just to Clint Smith. It's not just to a book that he worked really hard on. It's not just to make that assumption and to make that connection. But I was leery. I have an editor who wants me to, who has asked me to seriously consider reviewing this book. And I admit, at first, I balked. I know my own frustrations on this subject, and as unfair as they are, I know they exist, and that's lethal to a review. But I thought, all right, you shouldn't ever, my policy is never to say no, and also my policy is to try to be open-minded about every book. Let the book make its case against itself or for itself. So I got a copy of the book, and I opened it off camera, which is my major sin here, and I thought, okay, all right, lay it aside, you have it now, and when the time comes, and I couldn't resist. I read it. And it is serious, and it is seriously good. Seriously good. This in this particular case, we won't tell them because you don't want to encourage editors, but in this particular case, my editor's instincts were spot on. This is a book worth attention. It is very much worth attention, where the author goes to various lightning rod places. these Confederate statues in parks, these street names and park names and former plantations that are now tourist attractions. He goes to Monticello and talks to the people who are there, all kinds of people, not just the blue checkmark progressives on Twitter. Talks to all kinds of people and does it. I admit my hackles were up at the beginning. I was thinking, all right, well, so you're going to spend the first 30 pages of your book setting up a whole gallery of straw men, and then you're going to knock them all down. And that almost never happens. It barely ever happens. I imagine that he couldn't resist some of it, but mostly this is, I kept thinking as I was reading it, this is an uncomfortable inquiry. This is an important book. It's going to be a pleasure to review it. Warts and all, it's going to be a pleasure to review it. So let me tell you about the author. Clint Smith is a staff writer for The Atlantic and the author of the poetry collection Counting Descent. He has received fellowships from the New America, the Emerson Collective, the Art for Justice Fund, Cave Canem, and the National Science Foundation. His writings have been published in the New Yorker, the New York Times, Poetry, and the Paris Review, and elsewhere. He was born and raised in New Orleans. Oh my, the parts in here about New Orleans are amazing. And that is our author. And I actually, since I've got you here, I want to read just a bit, just one part of the part in New Orleans. I was born and raised in a city filled with statues of Confederate soldiers. White men on pedestals and black children playing beneath them, where black people played trumpets and trombones to drown out the Dixie song that still whistled in the wind. In my hometown of New Orleans, there are at least 100 streets, statues, parks, and schools named after Confederate figures, slave owners, and defenders of slavery. For decades, black children have walked into buildings named after people who thought of them as property. Let me read that again. For decades, black children have walked into buildings named after people who thought of them as property. My own middle school, Lusher, is named after Robert Mills Lusher, a Confederate and former Louisiana superintendent of education who fought against desegregation and who believed in, quote, the supremacy of the Caucasian race. Every time I returned home, I would drive on streets named for those who thought of me as chattel. And then he quotes, and this is just great. Picture living like this, how it gets into your blood. Go straight for 2 miles on Robert E. Lee. Take a left on Jefferson Davis. Make the first right on Claiborne, which translates, he offers translations. Go straight for 2 miles on the general whose troops slaughtered hundreds of black soldiers who were trying to surrender. Take a left on the president of the Confederacy who understood the torture of black bodies as the cornerstone of their new nation. Make a first right on the man who allowed the heads of rebelling slaves to be mounted on stakes in order to prevent other slaves from getting any ideas. Now, you can see a little bit of the conceptual slippage there that probably you have noticed in this discussion in 2021. Not all the time. This year has been bad for conceptual slippage. And you'll notice just a tiny bit of it, when he says, every time I returned home, I would drive on streets named for those who thought of me as chattel. There's a tiny bit of ideological slippage there because these men didn't know him. There is no blood crime here. There is no grandchildren paying for the crimes of their grandfathers. That is Old Testament. That is widely regarded everywhere by everyone as completely irrational barbarism. These people didn't know him. And I might add, and this is where I get into trouble, of course, but it's nevertheless demonstrably true, almost nobody who has met him in his life, met him, not someone who had the same skin tone, but 200 years ago, but who met him. Almost nobody in his life who has met him even remotely thought of him as chattel. And the one or two people who may have done that, I have no idea how widely he's traveled in the underbelly of the American Deep South. It's possible that he encountered someone who did, but that person is a worm. That person is an aberrant creature, a psychopath. Someone that even most sort of passively, lightly aggressive white people in this country would consider unfit to be on the front porch, much less in the front parlor. That is an outre and extremely unfair conflation there, that those figures named for those streets thought of him, Clint Smith, as chattel. They didn't. And when you do that sort of thing, Ta-Nehisi Coates has made a whole career out of doing that kind of thing. When you do that kind of thing, I think you hurt your cause. Because if you're saying that those dead people thought of him as chattel, then you're saying it's true of everybody alive today as well. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to hear that, especially not what I would consider to be the majority of white people in America who have... This is not an issue. This has long since gone away. There were hundreds of thousands of white people in the streets of America and every other city in the world in protest of what they saw on video, what happened to George Floyd. They weren't huddled at home saying, good, he got what he deserved. They were out in the streets protesting, as they were with Reverend King. So anyway, I shouldn't make too much of it, because that small ideological slippage doesn't happen often in this book. Instead, you get, look at the power of that passage alone. Look at the power of the writer's decision to translate those street names. Just that simple act. That's incredibly powerful. That line about how black children filing to schools named after people who bought and sold black people as property. What does that do? What does that say? And if, like, for instance, Lusher or any number of other people, if that's all they did, if they didn't do anything else, Washington was a slave owner, of course, and you know from watching this channel, I am no big fan of Washington. I'm also no big fan of Jefferson. But they did other things in addition to that. Those things were iniquitous, but they also helped to found a country that has given more freedom to more people than any other country. Genuine freedom, where you can do anything you put your mind to if you try. There may be obstacles, but you have genuine freedom. You can be born lower middle class, reusing paper bags, and you can grow up to be a multi-billionaire social figure named Oprah Winfrey, who is in command of a gigantic audience that adores her. If the person that is being named on these schools or on these statues, and keep in mind, most of that naming was done in the early part of the 20th century, not in the immediate wake of the war, of the Civil War, but in the early part of the 20th century, when there was a big vogue for romanticizing the southern side of the American Civil War, how it was a gallant, chivalric cause that was lost. It was possible, it was often done in the early years of the 20th century, in the so-called progressive era, to airbrush the whole idea of slavery right out of it. That's when really a real strong interpretive school of the American Civil War as being about states' rights really took birth, was then. And if these buildings and these streets and these statues are dedicated to people who did nothing but buy and sell other people as property, then we should change them. That fad is long gone. And if that's all you did with your life, if you were just a slave trader, the guy who was dumped into a harbor, you saw his statue dumped into a harbor, that's all he did in his life. Might have endowed an orphanage here and there, but most of what he did was buy and sell people as slaves and make himself rich in the process. We shouldn't be honoring such people. It's bad enough they're in the history books. It's our duty to read about them still, but we shouldn't be honoring them. You put a statue up in a park in order to honor somebody. Anyway, as you can see, I'm going to have to work really hard to hatch out a review of this book that is readable. And now I really want to. Now that I've read it, I really want to. This is indeed a valuable book. In fact, you can mark it in your calendar. This is probably, I don't know, this is probably the only time in my life I will agree with Ibram X. Kendi. Now, I don't know that for sure. It could be that he and I meet at some point in the future and maybe live a block away, and then we end up agreeing on the science fiction of Samuel Delany. Or maybe he's a big fan of the early novels of Gordon Dixon, and so am I. Who knows? It could be. But right now, this will be the only time where I agree with him. We do need this book. We do need this book. In fact, we could have used it last summer. But I'll take it now, and I'm looking forward to reviewing it. But we also have mail to open. Good God, that was a long digression on a subject that really can't stand digressions. It really should be the whole thing that you talk about. But fortunately, all I have to do is make sense of the books. I'm not out there trying to make policy. I'm not Stacey Abrams. I don't envy that at all. Let's see here. Let's move on. Let's see what we have here in terms of newer books. Although, I mean, this is also a new book. I think this comes out. Actually, this might have a sheet in it. I noticed that these two books, the Dumas and this one, both had pub sheets tucked into them. Which, if you remember, for our new books, wasn't true for a year. They were being sent from the warehouse, but not by public. They don't come with this thing, obviously. Your copy, your hardcover in your bookstore is not going to have pub sheet information. Instead, somebody had to tip this in, and somebody did. And that is giving me hope that there are people out there that are maybe going back to doing this. I didn't tell you, though, this comes out on June the 1st. How the Word is Passed, a valuable contribution to this subject. My full thoughts will be in my review, but I was happy to get a finished copy, and I was even happier when I finished it. So what is this next one? This next one is called Malefactor by Robert Rapino. It's from Soho Press, and they have a notice on the top of the pub sheet saying this is a series conclusion. And I got to confess, the cover design actually reminds me of something, so maybe I have read a book in this series. This is Malefactor. Very distinctive cover design. The enduring global interspecies conflict that began with war between humans and sentient animals in MORT parentheses E. I did read that. That had a cat on the cover. It wasn't an insect. It was a cat. Reaches an epic conclusion in his final book in The War with No Name, a dystopian series perfect for fans of A Canticle for Leibowitz or The Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Did the publicist who wrote this sheet not know that there is actually a novel, Planet of the Apes? Poor Pierre Boulle. Oh, man. The person's reaching for Canticle for Leibowitz, which has never been adapted, but also The Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which was so... Did the person who wrote this not know that there's a book? That's what they all look like. I'm sure you remember the cat ones. There was also a dog one. In the War with No Name series, Robert Rapino has crafted a world of ambitious scope where the fantastical, realized in sentient animals both ferocious and soulful. The world is already full of sentient animals both ferocious and soulful. Becomes allegorical for political conflicts, spiritual indoctrination, and the exploitive leadership in the human world. Okay, so, all right. Okay, so I have read Mort E, but I don't think I've read the middle two volumes there. The second cat one, I know I haven't read the dog one. And now I wonder if I need to. Oh my, I wonder if I should get in touch and maybe, with the publicist, and maybe get those others. Just in case I need to. Well, anyway, what is the date on this one? This is late August, so there is time to do that. So if you have read this series, those books, it is coming to a conclusion. So it's not just going to go on forever. I don't think I still have Mort E, and I know I don't have any of the others. Oh my. All right, well, that's coming out in late August. Some science fiction, some allegorical science fiction for you. Ordinarily my skin starts to crawl when I hear the word allegory, because people can't do it anymore. It was never all that much worthwhile to do, but writers can't do it anymore anyway, even if they tried. But I liked Mort E, so maybe it's not that bad. Oh, great. Okay, fantastic. All right. This is a finished copy also from Soho Press of something we've seen already. I have read this, but I will very happily reread it. And it was great. Just fantastic. It's a murder mystery novel. It's called The Bombay Prince, a mystery of 1920s India by Sujata Massey. And this is part of a series that started with The Widows of Malabar Hill. Is that the first one? Is that the first one in here? You're certainly going to tell me, right? The Widows of Malabar Hill, and then A Satapur Moonstone was the second one. This is the third book in the series. So still time for you to jump on board here. About a very memorable protagonist in 1920s India. This is a really, really good mystery series, historical murder mystery series, and it's only 2 other books, so you can get in on it here. Don't wait, because Sujata Massey already wrote a murder mystery series, and it went on a long time. This one could go on a long time. I certainly hope it does. Let's see here. November 1921. Bombay is on the precipice of revolution as Gandhi's independence movement takes hold. Protests take over the streets as Edward VIII, Prince of Wales, begins his first visit to a country he is supposed to rule. Into this chaos steps Sujata Massey's triumphant lawyer-turned-sleuth, Perveen Mistry. as she sets out to untangle a murder plot worthy of the Gilded Age masters of the genre. Mystery is a wonderful invention, inspired by a real historical figure, India's first female lawyer, the Parsi scholar Cornelia Sorabji. Perveen Mystery is both extraordinary and an everywoman, clever and compassionate, uniquely positioned to represent the interests of women who have fallen through the gaps in patriarchal religious and civil law. Through this fictional character, the author has found a way to explore and redress individual social histories in 1920s Bombay while creating a forceful conversation about issues relevant to contemporary readers. Okay, no idea who wrote this pub sheet, but I want to stress, despite what you heard, these are really good reading. You are not going to be lectured. You are not going to sociology class. These are really, really good golden age pastiche novels. They are heavy on plot, heavy on character. The feints, the red herrings are all wonderfully done. The atmosphere is fantastically evoked. So, issues relevant to contemporary readers, that might give you the heebie-jeebies the same way that it would me, but take it my word for it. That is not mainly what you're going to get here. So what is the mystery? I think we saw this, the advanced copy. Days before 18-year-old Frenny Cuttingmaster fell to her death just as the Prince of Wales' grand procession was passing by her college, she went to Perveen for legal advice. Like Perveen Mystery, Frenny was Parsi, from the Zoroastrian religious minority. Also like Perveen, she was a woman educating herself despite social pressures. And like Perveen, Frenny was supported the Indian independence movement against her family's convictions. So why did she die? Did she follow what she pushed, and why? Now, in my heart of hearts, of course, I would like it if the Prince of Wales was actually the murderer and was executed for the crime. But of course, no, he's making a progression, but he's going on to become the shortest reigning English monarch of all time because he wanted to abdicate in order to marry the woman I love. But I'm sure there'll be a villain. There'll be a villain for you to cheer on. I thought this was fantastic. I can't wait to read it again. I will read this finished copy. And then maybe write about it. I'm not sure where I would write about it. But like, for instance, I for those of you who might be new or might not be up on your current events, there's a tiny print newspaper in northern Georgia, Big Canoe News. They are great. It's a fantastic local newspaper. It comes out once a month. $30 a year will get you a year-long subscription. And they have an original book section at the back of the news section at the front of the paper that lands on your doorstep every month. And that two-page, it's a wonderful, full-color, beautifully designed two-page spread of original books content, and I am their book section editor. I am the editor of that section. And I have a mystery columnist. I have a woman named Tricia who does a mystery column every other month. But there's no law that says I can't review a murder mystery or commission one. In the meantime, right? People love murder mysteries. And they're going to love this series. The urge in this series, the urge that I have is to trumpet this from the rooftops because people need to know about it. So this comes out on June the 1st. Boy, I'm getting a lot of books here that I can just wholeheartedly recommend to you. That's fantastic. I wholeheartedly recommend this series to you. Go and find, online or at your bookstore or your used bookstore, a nice cheap copy of The Widows of Malabar Hill and give it a try. You will really like it, and you will want the rest of them, the Satapur Moonstone and then this one. But anyway, that's great. We're doing just fine here. Let's blast on here. You can see already what I'm talking about, right? I was not being unfair. The bean wilts in the heat. I don't know why, but she does. And the reason that I'm trying to enlist you as an ally is because I feel like I need you to help me make the case to her. She doesn't believe it. She wilts in the heat. Anyway. Oh, great. Okay, fantastic. All right, this one doesn't have the pub sheet tipped in, but I have not read the whole of this. I had an ebook. I got an ebook of this, and I started it, but then I put it aside. Wanted to wait for the finished copy with the pictures and the bibliography and whatnot. This is by Colin Heaton and Anne-Marie Lewis, and it's called Above the Reich. And that is a full-length book as its subtitle, just in case you don't feel like reading the book. Deadly dogfights, blistering bombing raids, and other war stories from the greatest American air heroes of World War II in their own words. No reason whatsoever for a subtitle, let alone a subtitle that long, but nevertheless, there it is. And this is exactly what you would think. There are all the people that tell their stories in this book. They are voices lost to time. Beginning in the late 1970s, 5 veteran airmen sat for private interviews. Decades after the guns fell silent, they recounted in vivid detail the most dangerous missions that made the difference in the war. Ed Hayden dueled with the deadliest of German aces and brought him down. Robert Johnson racked up 27 kills in his B-47 Thunderbolt, but nearly lost his life when his plane was shot to ribbons and his guns jammed. Curtis LeMay was the Air Corps general who devised the bomber tactics that pummeled Germany's war machine. Yes, indeed, that is true. Curtis LeMay also pummeled Germany's civilian centers as well. And he knew it, and he did it anyway. What's the matter? You don't like Curtis LeMay? I don't like him either. Anyway, Robin Olds was a West Point football hero who became one of the most dogged, aggressive fighter pilots in the European theater, relentlessly pursuing Germans in his P-38 Lightning. And Jimmy Doolittle became the most celebrated American airman of the war, maybe even of all time, after he led the audacious raid to bomb Tokyo. And here you have their interviews, plus I would imagine a lot of historical larding, an introduction, lots of historical underpinning for those interviews. So, you know, an aviation fan is of course going to want this book, but also a World War II fan. The World War II books will be from major publishers. This is Caliber. World War II books will be thick on the ground at the end of summer, but at the beginning of summer they usually aren't, and they aren't right now. So this I don't have a pub sheet for it, but I bet this is a June release. Baby, I've got books piled here. If you jump down, you're going to knock them on the floor. You want to do that, do you? All right, let's keep going. This is going long. Okay. Baby, if you jump down, you're going to knock all the books down on the floor. Why don't you stay up on your couch? You're on a couch with a pillow. No? All right, let's move these out of the way. Try and mitigate the damage. All right, down you go. She's deciding if she wants to make the other jump. Do you want to go down there? No, you don't. Okay, well now I have nowhere to put the ball. She's gone to sleep right next to me. Baby, that's where these books were. All right, let's put them somewhere else. I swear. Anyway, let's see what this next one is. From Princeton University Press. Oh, goodness gracious. All right, big thing. This is by Michael Keane and Joel Slemrod. And it is Rebellion, Rascals, and Revenue, Tax Follies, and Wisdom Through the Ages, with an exclamation point. Clearly, I am not the person to write about this. Publishing just ahead of U.S. Tax Day. Oh, so this is late getting to me. Yeah, this is late getting to me. This is an April release. This is a lively and surprising global historical tour of crazy, bizarre, and even sometimes gruesome taxes through the ages. Taking such a grand sweep of history with intelligence and dry wit, the IMF's Michael Keane and Michigan professor Joel Slemrod provide countless lessons for current-day tax enforcers and those who pay and avoid taxes. Some examples: taxing beards. Texas chain store massacre. Many U.S. states adopted taxes that discouraged the proliferation of chain stores. Ludicrous differences. Among the many tax differences that do not reflect any real difference are sliced and untaxed bagels taxed differently in New York. Feed for rabbits and feed for guinea pigs taxed at different rates in the Netherlands. A massive court case in the UK on the difference between cakes and biscuits. Okay, all right. Well, this is going to be pretty interesting. But it's going to need someone of an economic bent, I think, to review it. We shall see. We shall see. Okay, taxes. And then we'll finish up with this last one, and then we'll be done, because this has gone on long. This last one is heavy. Probably another finish. No, it's a paperback. Oh boy, oh my god. This, I can't believe it. One of you must have done this. Does it say? Yeah, one of you has finally done it. One of you got me the Norton Critical Edition of The Tale of Genji. And it is the second New York Norton Critical Edition with my name on it. Right there. So in schools all throughout the country, that's what these books are for. You get the text of the work at the front, and then you get interpretive essays in the back, plus a helpful introduction, timelines, all that sort of stuff. This is supposed to be a sort of a classroom in a book for whatever book it's about. And this is, I wish I had another Norton Critical here so I could show you. The dimensions are immense because this is a 1,000-page book. This is the Dennis Washburn translation, and they have ported over from my review of that translation a named blurb. So in every school in the country where this is taught, where the school buys this, those students are going to see my name. What a thrill. No matter what happens, this Norton Critical edition of a book I love has my name on it. Incredible. And one of you actually went and got it. That is so nice. This is also very pretty. Arguably prettier than the Washburn translation in trade paperback. Okay, so this is reformatted. The pages are wider. It's, you know, a really floppy trade paperback, so you'll be able to have it open even at the beginning of the story. And it'll have the whole of the Tale of Genji, I imagine, unless Washburn edited it, unless he abridged his translation somehow. But it'll also have all sorts of critical work. Not much, because most of it's taken up with the book itself. But I'm hoping two things. I'm hoping there's a lot of Japanese criticism of this. There's been oceans of Japanese criticism. Japanese, not criticism, but essays about, reflections on, analysis of. I hope there's a lot of that, although a lot of that might require original translations, which would up the price of producing this volume. But I also hope, as outdated as it is, I hope that Virginia Woolf's essay on Genji is in here. I probably it's not, because there wouldn't be enough room. But so you get Tale of Genji for 1,177 pages, and then you get context. Oh, and fantastic. Okay, it's a huge amount of Japanese criticism over centuries. A huge amount of reactions to this book over centuries. This has been a masterpiece for a long time. Oh, Virginia Woolf is in here. Oh my. Can you make that out? She's in there. They actually included her. Fantastic. Oh, fantastic. Oh, and lots of other stuff too. Wow. Great. And Dennis Washburn has an essay of his own in here. So, okay, so the book is 1,370-something pages long. So you get 200 pages of critical stuff in addition to a gigantically long epic. Incredible. Well, whoever you are, I don't know if this has a note in it, but whoever you are who sent this, I cannot thank you enough. My second, I'm on Crime and Punishment in Norton Critical Edition, but this is my second one where I am name blurbed on a Norton Critical Edition that's going to go into schools. Students are going to flip to the back of this to wonder what's going on and see these names. And I'll be one of them. Incredible. Oh my. All right, well, that is certainly the highlight. So you have the Norton Critical Tale of Genji. We have Rebellion, Rascals, and Revenue, a book about weird taxes. We have The Bombay Prince by Sujata Massey. A strong recommend. New mystery series, relatively new mystery series. You can catch up. Then we have Malefactor, the concluding volume in The War with No Name. We have Above the Reich, the oral testimony of the men who actually flew these missions. We have How the Word is Passed, Clint Smith's debut, his nonfiction debut, and what a debut. Hope it gets lots of attention. I really do. And I want to hear more from this author. So that is fantastic. And finally, Between Two Kings, the latest Lawrence Ellsworth translation of the works of Dumas. And now that I think about it, we ended with a blurb of mine, but do we also start with a blurb of mine? Because I have reviewed Lawrence Ellsworth a few times, effusively. In fact, I was, as I so often am, the first American critic to climb up on the roof and say everyone should be paying attention to this. This is amazing. Okay, I am. Twice. There is me reviewing it for the Christian Science Monitor, and there is me reviewing another volume of the series for Open Letters. No, it wasn't me. It was Zach Rabaroff who reviewed it for Open Letters Review. I believe he reviewed, I think, The Three Musketeers itself for Open Letters Review. I don't think that was me. It's great to see Open Letters Review as a blurb on a book. That is fantastic, especially on a hardcover. But the Christian Science Monitor was certainly me. So we did, in fact, start and finish today's mail haul with blurbs by Steve. So there's going to be no living with me. Anyway, this is a huge video. I'm going to wrap this up and figure out what to do with Her Majesty. I have to figure out what to do. It is 90 degrees Fahrenheit outside. We have to go for walks. I don't want her getting restless. I don't want her feeling trapped. But we can't go for a long walk, and that's what she's going to want. I will just be a firm parent. That's all. That's no other way. There's no way around it. So I'll wrap this up. Pray for Mojo, and I will be back. Thank you too.